remember the exact moment the phone call came in. I was standing in the kitchen, the late morning light spilling through the window, casting long shadows on the walls. The house was silent, too silent. The kids had already left for college, and it had been just me and Jim for the past few years, quiet, peaceful, and, though I hate to admit it, sometimes lonely. Jim was always the one who could fill the empty spaces, the gaps where laughter should be, where conversation should flow. But now it was just me. The phone rang, slicing through the stillness. I saw Jim's name on the screen. For a split second, my heart leaped. Maybe he'd decided to surprise me, maybe he was on his way home early. It was the kind of thing he would do. Jim had always been that way, spontaneous, unpredictable, the kind of man who would show up at the door with flowers just because it was Tuesday. My heart fluttered with hope as I answered. But it was Jim's voice that greeted me. "Mrs. Hayes," the voice on the other end said, "I'm terribly sorry, but I'm afraid your husband has passed away." I don't know how I didn't drop the phone. Maybe I was in shock. Maybe I was still waiting for him to walk through the door with that goofy grin on his face, like he always did. Maybe the words hadn't really sunk in yet. "Passed away," I repeated, the words tasting foreign in my mouth, like they didn't belong to my life. "Yes, ma'am, there was an accident, he didn't make it." I felt like the room was spinning, like I was floating outside my body, looking at myself from above. I couldn't breathe. It felt like every inch of air in the room had been sucked out, leaving only a hollow, suffocating emptiness. "Where?" I whispered, gripping the phone tighter as if it might slip from my hands. "They're on their way to the hospital now, but you can come down and identify him if you'd like." My legs gave out. I sank to the floor, unable to process the words. Jim, my Jim, was gone. I didn't know how to make sense of it. I didn't know how to breathe without him. The next few hours were a blur, a haze of frantic motions. My hands were shaking as I packed a bag, as I drove to the hospital. I couldn't see the road through the tears, but somehow I made it. The hospital staff didn't say much. They didn't need to. I saw Jim lying there, still and pale, and the weight of it hit me in a way I couldn't have prepared for. I kept hopping, praying, really, that they were wrong, that this was some kind of mistake, and that any moment he would wake up and say, "Hey, what's all the fuss about?" But there was no wake-up. No Jim. The funeral arrangements were difficult. We didn't have a lot of family. Jim's side had passed away years ago, and mine, well, we hadn't spoken in a long time. After all those years of keeping the peace, making sure the kids were okay, making sure everyone was okay, it was just me now. The phone calls I made felt foreign, uncomfortable. I reached out to his brother, his best friend, but most of them were too far away, or too busy, or too wrapped up in their own lives. So I did everything myself. I called the funeral home, arranged for the service. It was strange, this business of arranging someone else's death. It felt wrong, like I wasn't supposed to be the one doing it. But there was no one else, no one to help. I remember packing through the house, thinking about how I would tell the kids. Our kids, Dylan, the oldest, and Emma, the younger one. They had their lives to live, their busy schedules. Dylan was finishing his senior year at university. Emma had just started her first job in the city. But we had always been close, or so I thought. I thought they would come home. I thought they would drop everything to be with their father, to say goodbye. I dialed Dylan's number first. It rang, and I felt my anxiety rising with every unanswered second. When he finally picked up, I could hear the music blaring in the background. "Mom, what's up?" he asked casually, like nothing was wrong. "Dylan," I began, struggling to steady my voice. "It's your dad, he's gone." There was silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he processed what I had said. And then, finally, he spoke. "Wait, what? What happened?" I could hear laughter in the background, muffled voices, the kind of noise you hear when people are out having fun. It grated against the heaviness of what I was trying to tell him. "Dylan, please come home. We need to make arrangements. I don't want to do this alone." There was another long silence before he spoke again, but his voice had changed. It was quieter, distant. "Mom, I can't right now. I've got a big exam coming up. And there's this party, I interrupted him, my voice shaking now. "Dylan, your father is dead. You're telling me you're going to stay at a party? You can't even come home to be with your mother." My chest tightened, the hurt raw and unmistakable. "I'll try to come as soon as I can, okay? I promise." He sounded guilty, but there was a certain flatness to it, like he wasn't really seeing the gravity of the situation. But there's a lot going on, I just don't know how soon I can make it. And then he hung up. I sat there for a long time, the phone pressed to my ear, my hand trembling. It wasn't just Dylan. I tried calling Emma next, but the result was the same. She was too busy with work, had other things to do, and would try to get home when she could. In the end, neither of them came. The funeral was a lonely affair. There were a few friends from Jim's work, some of his distant relatives, but no one who truly mattered. No children to help me, no one who could share this pain with me. It was just me, standing at the grave, the weight of Jim's absence pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. I tried to hold it together. I tried to act like everything was fine, like I wasn't completely falling apart. But every step felt heavier, the grief gnawing at me like a constant ache. And all I could think about was how my children, my flesh and blood, had chosen to stay behind. Chosen to party, to continue with their lives, while I was left to bury their father alone. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I made my way back home. The house felt emptier than ever. There was no warmth, no laughter, no one to fill the silence. I wondered if it would ever feel the same again, if anything would ever feel the same. I should have expected it, I suppose. The years had been hard on our family. The fights, the distance, the growing estrangement. But this was a betrayal I couldn't have prepared for. And as I sat alone in the quiet of the house, I wondered if I had been wrong all along. If everything I had done for my children, everything I had sacrificed, had been for nothing. Would they ever see what I had given up for them? Would they ever realize what their choices had cost me? And more than anything, I wondered how long it would take for the pain to fade, if it ever would. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, arrangements, and paperwork. I don't know how I managed to get through it all, but somehow I did. My hands were numb as I signed the papers for Jim's burial plot, as I selected flowers, as I tried to hold myself together long enough to make decisions that I never thought I'd have to make. But none of it felt real. Jim's death, his absence, the silence in the house, it all felt like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Every corner I turned, I half expected him to be there, smiling at me, telling me not to worry, that everything would be fine. But the house was empty, and so was my heart. I tried calling Dylan again. The phone rang, but this time it only took a few seconds before he picked up. "Mom," he said, his voice strained, like he hadn't been expecting my call. "Dylan," I said, my voice breaking, "your father's funeral is in a few days. I need you here. I need you to come home." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of a car engine rumbling faintly, and then Dylan's voice returned, quieter than before. "I know, Mom. I told you I'll try to get there. But things are a little crazy right now. I've got this big final project that's due, and I can't just drop everything." His words were rushed, like he was trying to make them sound reasonable, but nothing about it felt reasonable to me. "Dylan, this is your father's funeral. You can't just choose school over this." I was pleading now, and I hated it. I hated that I had to beg my own son to come home, to honor his father. "I know, Mom. I'll get there, I promise. I just need a few more days." I could feel my chest tightening as I fought back tears. "A few more days? Your father won't be here a few more days. Dylan, please, don't make me do this alone." The silence between us felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I wanted him to understand. I wanted him to feel the same urgency, the same grief, but all he seemed to care about was his own life, his own plans. "I know, Mom. I'll try my best. I'll come as soon as I can." And that was it. The conversation ended there, with the same empty promise he had made before. I don't even remember if he said goodbye. I hung up the phone and stared at it for a long time, my heart sinking further into the pit of despair. Every word Dylan had said felt like another dagger in my chest. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how selfish he was being, how much this hurt. But what good would that do? What good would anything do if he didn't even care enough to come? I tried to push those thoughts away, tried to focus on the funeral itself. I had to get it right. I had to make sure Jim's memory was honored, even if no one else cared to be there. I called a few friends of Jim's, the ones who had always been around, the ones who had helped us when things were tough. But they too had their own lives to live, their own commitments. The ones who did show up were distant, polite, but nothing more. I felt their eyes on me, pity and discomfort lingering in their glances. I knew they were thinking the same thing I was. Where were my children? Why weren't they here? I even reached out to Emma. She hadn't been able to come the day Jim passed, but I had hoped, desperately hoped, that she would show up for the funeral. I dialed her number, the ring tone too loud in the quiet of the house. "Mom," her voice sounded tired, like she hadn't slept in days. "Emma, please, I need you here. Your father deserves that. I need you here with me." She hesitated before answering, and when she spoke, her words felt cold. "I can't, Mom. I've been swamped at work. There's just too much going on. I'm really sorry. I'll come as soon as I can, but I just can't right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're telling me you're too busy to come to your father's funeral?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "I know it's not ideal, Mom, but this is my job. I don't have a choice." There was a long pause. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." Make it up to me? How could she make this up? What was there to make up when she couldn't even be bothered to come home when I needed her most? I was crushed, the weight of her indifference pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. "Fine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll just take care of it on my own. I guess that's what I've always done." "Mom, don't be like this." Her voice softened, but it was too late. I had already heard what I needed to hear. There would be no changing her mind, no sudden moment of clarity where she would realize how wrong this was. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night I sat alone in the living room, the lights dimmed low, the silence so deep it felt like I was drowning in it. The house, once filled with the chaos of children and laughter, now felt like a tomb. It was just me and the memories of what used to be. I kept replaying the conversation with Dylan in my mind, trying to make sense of it. I kept asking myself, how did we get here? How did I end up begging my children to show up for their own father's funeral? I had spent years putting them first, making sure they had everything they needed, everything they wanted. And yet, when the time came to honor the man who had given them everything, they couldn't be bothered. It didn't make sense. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jim's face, his smile, the way he used to look at me when he was happy, when he was proud of me. I remembered the way he would hold my hand at night, the way he would whisper, "I love you," before we fell asleep. Now, all I had left were these memories, and they were starting to fade. The next day, I called the funeral home to confirm the arrangements. It was all happening too fast, too much at once. They assured me everything would be taken care of, that they would handle the details, that I just needed to show up. But how could I? How could I show up for something that felt so wrong? How could I stand in front of everyone, pretending everything was fine, when my children, my flesh and blood, couldn't even show up to say goodbye? That night, I made another call. It wasn't to Dylan or Emma this time. It was to someone from my past, someone who might understand what I was going through. Someone who knew what it felt like to be betrayed, to be left behind. I didn't know why I called them, but I did. And as the phone rang, I realized that maybe I was finally ready to do something I hadn't considered before. Maybe, just maybe, I was ready to make a choice. But that was something I would have to decide tomorrow. For tonight, I could only sit with the pain of my own family's absence and wonder if I would ever find a way to heal. The day of Jim's funeral arrived with a heaviness that settled in my chest like an anchor. I woke early, as I always had, but this morning was different. The house was empty. The silence felt unnatural. The scent of coffee lingered in the kitchen, where Jim used to sit, sipping his cup, flipping through the newspaper, and making the most mundane moments feel like something special. It felt as though I was walking through someone else's life, someone else's house. My life had been stolen from me, and with it, the promise that my children would be there when it mattered the most. I had spent the morning getting ready in a fog, my hands moving on autopilot, dressing in the black dress I had worn to too many funerals. It seemed absurd. I was mourning Jim, but I was also mourning the family I had lost, a family that had chosen to disappear when I needed them most. By the time I was ready, the house felt colder. I couldn't wait any longer. The funeral would start soon, and still, there was no word from Dylan, no word from Emma. I'd tried calling them both once more, but neither had answered. The messages I left were filled with so much hurt that I almost regretted leaving them at all, but I knew I had no other way to reach them. I needed them to know how much they had broken me, how much their absence would haunt me forever. I stepped outside and drove to the funeral home, my mind spiraling. Every thought seemed to crash against the next. Was this what Jim would have wanted? Was this what I deserved after all those years of loving, sacrificing, and giving everything to our family? I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They spilled over, blurring the road ahead of me, making it even harder to navigate. The parking lot of the funeral home was already filled with cars when I arrived. Friends and acquaintances, faces I hadn't seen in years, greeted me with polite, empty words. They offered their condolences, their sympathy, but all I could think about was how Jim wasn't there to share these moments with them. How his absence was slowly becoming the backdrop to my grief. I stood in the entrance for a moment, taking it all in. The flowers, the soft music playing in the background, the somber atmosphere. It was exactly how Jim would have wanted it, I suppose. Simple, respectful, yet it didn't feel real. It didn't feel like a funeral. It felt like a performance, something I was expected to participate in because that was what was required of me. I took my seat in the front row, all the while glancing at the door, hopping, praying that Dylan and Emma would walk through it, that they would show up finally and I wouldn't have to do this alone. But the minutes dragged on, then the hours, and still they didn't come. No call, no text, no nothing. I tried not to look at the empty chair beside me. I tried not to think about the promises they had made to me, the promises they had broken. But the longer I sat there, the more impossible it became to ignore the truth. The service started, and I forced myself to pay attention. The preacher spoke kindly, offering words that seemed to float over me without touching me. His words, though well-meaning, didn't matter. They couldn't touch the deep, raw pain I felt. No one could reach me now. I don't remember much of the service. I remember the way people spoke in hushed tones, the quiet sobs of those around me. I remember the way the coffin looked, sitting there in front of me, heavy with the weight of finality. But the most vivid memory of that day was the silence. The absence of Dylan and Emma, who were supposed to be there for their father. I couldn't stop thinking about it. How had they gotten so far from me? From us? From the family we used to be? It felt as though a great chasm had opened between us, one that could never be crossed. And I didn't know whether I was sadder that they hadn't come, or that, deep down, I had known they wouldn't. The service came to an end, and the small group of people that had gathered began to file out of the room. The preacher offered his final blessings, but I was already numb to everything he said. I could hear the murmur of voices, the rustle of feet against the floor, but it was all a distant hum. The only thing I could focus on was the empty space beside me. As the guests left, I remained seated, frozen in place, staring at the coffin that would soon be lowered into the ground. A soft sob escaped my lips, and I wiped my eyes quickly, trying to compose myself. But I couldn't stop the flood of emotion. It felt like a dam had broken inside me, and everything I had been holding back was crashing through the walls I had built. I don't know how long I sat there before someone came to sit beside me. It was Jim's best friend, Tom. I hadn't seen him in years, but I remembered him from our younger days, always laughing, always full of life. He sat down next to me, awkwardly at first, but then he placed a hand on my shoulder, offering a silent comfort. "You holding up okay?" he asked gently. I looked at him, and for a brief moment, I saw the sadness in his eyes. But more than that, I saw the confusion, the helplessness. He knew what I was going through, but there was nothing he could do to make it better. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to say goodbye to him when my kids aren't even here." Tom looked away for a moment, his face tightening in sympathy. "I'm sorry, Maria, I really am, but sometimes people just don't know how to deal with things, they don't know how to face the pain." I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear that my children didn't know how to deal with the loss of their father. They were adults, they were supposed to know better. They were supposed to put family first. "I don't know what to do anymore," I admitted, the words feeling like a confession, a plea for understanding. "I've spent my whole life giving to them, supporting them, and now they won't even come when their dad dies. I don't know what I did wrong." Tom sighed, his grip on my shoulder tightening. "Maria, you didn't do anything wrong. People change. And sometimes, when they're faced with something like this, they just can't handle it. It's not about you, it's about them." "I'm so tired of being strong for everyone," I said, my voice barely audible. "I've done it for so long, and now, when I need them most, they're nowhere to be found." Tom didn't have an answer for that. No one did. There was no answer to the pain of being betrayed by the very people you had devoted your life to. I could see the pity in his eyes, and I hated it. I didn't want pity. I wanted my children. I wanted the family I had sacrificed everything for. But there was nothing to be done. Jim was gone, and with him, it felt like a part of me had died too. As the last of the mourners filed out, I stayed behind. I couldn't bring myself to leave. I stood by Jim's grave for a long time, my heart heavy with so many emotions: grief, anger, loneliness. And above all, I felt a deep, aching betrayal. It wasn't just that Jim was gone, it was that my children, the ones I had loved and raised, had chosen to stay away. And as I stood there, watching the grave fill, I realized something that tore at my soul. The pain of losing Jim wasn't the only wound I had to bear. It was the betrayal of my children, their refusal to honor their father's memory, that hurt me most. The wind blew through the cemetery. The sound of the leaves rustling in the trees was the only thing that kept me company. I stood there for what felt like hours, feeling more and more like a ghost. The family I had once known was slipping through my fingers, and all I could do was watch. I finally turned away, my heart heavy with more than just loss. I felt like I was walking away from my own life. I didn't know where I was going anymore. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The days after the funeral felt like a slow, suffocating crawl. I went through the motions of daily life, trying to pretend that everything was normal, trying to convince myself that this was just a phase, that eventually my children would come to their senses. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't just a phase. The rift between us had been there for a long time, and now it was unbridgeable. Dylan finally called me a few days after the funeral, and when I saw his name flash on my phone, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. I had no idea what I'd say to him, or how I could possibly begin to understand why he had abandoned me at the most crucial moment of my life. I answered the phone with a forced calmness, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dylan," I said, my heart pounding, "you finally decided to call." There was a hesitation on the other end of the line, like he wasn't sure how to begin. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, his voice tight, almost nervous. "I've just been really overwhelmed with everything, finals and all. I didn't mean to hurt you." The apology felt hollow, like a token gesture. A formality. It wasn't enough to cover up the hurt, the betrayal I felt from the absence of my child when I needed him most. "Overwhelmed?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "Is that what you're calling it, overwhelmed? Dylan, your father died, and you stayed at a party." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him shifting, trying to find the words, but I wasn't sure there were any words that could make it better. I wasn't sure there was anything he could say to make the weight of his absence, of his choices, go away. "Mom, I didn't know what to do," Dylan said, his voice small now, a far cry from the confident young man I had raised. "I thought maybe it would be easier if I just stayed busy, I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to face you." That hit me like a slap to the face. He didn't want to face me. The person who had given everything for him, who had stood by him through every failure, every heartbreak, who had sacrificed her own life to raise him, he didn't want to face me. The tears came fast then, the ache in my chest expanding, consuming everything. "Why?" I whispered. "Why, Dylan? I've spent my whole life trying to make sure you had everything you needed. And when I needed you, when your father needed you, you chose a party. You chose to avoid the reality of what was happening." "I didn't know how to handle it, Mom," Dylan's voice cracked. I didn't know what to do, and I thought, maybe if I just kept busy, it wouldn't hurt so much. It wasn't about not caring." I could hear the strain in his voice, the guilt, but it didn't change anything. It didn't change the fact that he hadn't been there, that I had been left alone to bury Jim. I had been left alone to mourn, to carry the weight of everything. And I didn't know how to forgive him. I didn't know if I ever could. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. "You weren't just avoiding me, Dylan. You were avoiding the truth. You were avoiding the fact that your father is gone, and that's not something you can just brush off." "I know," he said, his voice softer now. "And I'm sorry, I really am. I don't know what to do now." I swallowed hard, pushing down the lump in my throat. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that I couldn't bear this pain anymore, that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I just said the words that I knew would hurt both of us. You should have been here, Dylan, I said, each word a weight that threatened to crush me. You should have been here when it mattered, but you weren't, and now, I don't know how to fix it. He didn't respond at first, and when he did, it was with a quiet, almost broken voice. I'll come home soon, Mom. I swear I will. I'll make it right. I'll do whatever I can to make it up to you. I don't know if you can, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I don't know if I can trust you again. And with that, the conversation ended. I couldn't stay on the phone any longer. I hung up without another word, feeling the deep ache of rejection settling into the pit of my stomach. The phone call had been nothing more than a small bandage on an open wound. It didn't heal anything. It didn't make me feel better. It only reminded me of what I had lost. I sat down on the couch, the emptiness of the house pressing in on me. It was too quiet, too still. Jim was gone, and Dylan and Emma were far away. I was alone. And even though I had raised them, given them everything, I couldn't make them see what they had taken from me. I thought about Emma then, wondering if she was thinking about me at all, wondering if she even cared. I had tried to call her a few times, but she hadn't answered. I hadn't heard from her since the funeral, and I knew, deep down, that I wasn't going to hear from her anytime soon. That evening, I found myself picking up the phone again. This time, I wasn't calling Dylan. I wasn't calling Emma. Instead, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years, an old friend of mine. Someone I had known long before I met Jim, someone who had always been there for me when I needed a shoulder to cry on. Her voice, when she answered, was a comforting sound, even after all this time. "Maria," she said, her tone soft with surprise. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice cracking. "No, it's not. Jim's gone, and I don't know what to do anymore. My kids, they won't even come home. I feel like I'm losing everything, and I don't know how to get it back." There was a pause and then a sigh. "Maria, I wish I could be there for you right now," she said. "But I know this isn't easy. Losing someone is never easy, and it's always harder when the people you love don't show up when you need them most." "I don't know what happened," I said, my words tumbling out in a rush. "I gave everything to them, everything, and now they're just gone like they don't even care." "I know it feels that way," she said softly. "But sometimes people get lost in their own lives, and they don't know how to deal with grief. They don't know how to face the hurt. I'm sure Dylan and Emma love you, but they're struggling with their own things right now, and they're not ready to face what happened." That was the problem. I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to hear that my children were struggling with their own things when their father had just died. I didn't want to hear that their struggles were more important than the family we had once been. "I don't know if I can forgive them," I whispered. "I don't know if I can ever forget what they did." "Maria," she said gently, "forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean excusing their behavior, but it means healing. It means moving forward, even when it feels impossible." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words. Could I forgive them? Could I really move forward, knowing that my children had abandoned me when I needed them most? "I don't know," I whispered. "I just don't know." We talked for a while longer, but eventually I hung up, feeling both comforted and lost. My friend's words were kind, but they didn't erase the pain. They didn't make the betrayal go away. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about my children, about the things they would never understand. How could they not see? How could they not understand the depth of what they had done? And in the end, I realized something. I couldn't wait forever for them to change. I couldn't keep hoping that they would come to their senses. The truth was, they had already chosen their path, and I had to decide if I would continue to wait or if I would finally let go. The ache in my chest felt unbearable, but as the days passed, I began to accept that there was no easy answer. There was no magic fix. There was only the painful, slow process of moving forward, even if it meant walking alone. Days turned into weeks, and still I struggled. The house was too quiet, the memories of Jim too loud. Each room felt empty, each corner too still. His clothes hung in the closet, untouched. His shoes sat by the door, waiting for a pair of feet that would never step into them again. And I was left with the hollow feeling of not just losing my husband, but with the slow, painful realization that I was losing my children too. It hurt more than I could put into words. I'd raised them with love. I had sacrificed so much of myself for them. And yet here I was, sitting alone in the wreckage of my family. I tried to convince myself that Dylan and Emma would come around. I tried to tell myself that they just needed time. But the truth was, I didn't have time. I couldn't keep pretending that everything would be fine. I needed them to understand the depth of what had happened. I needed them to feel the pain of losing Jim, not just for me, but for themselves, too. But they didn't get it. They hadn't shown up for the funeral and they didn't call. Not once. Dylan had promised to come, and Emma had said she would make it up to me, but their promises felt as empty as the space around me. I couldn't just sit here and wait forever. I couldn't keep living with the weight of this betrayal and still hope that one day they'd magically come to their senses. It was one of those late nights, the kind where the house felt too large and the darkness outside pressed against the windows like a wall, that I made a decision. I didn't know what would come of it, but I knew I had to do something. I had to make them understand the magnitude of what they had done. I had to make them face the reality of their choices. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling as I dialed a number I hadn't dialed in years. The number belonged to someone I had once trusted, someone I had relied on when things had gone wrong before. Someone who, like me, had seen the cracks in the facade of my family and understood how deep they went. I wasn't sure what would happen once I made the call, but I knew I had no other options. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was warm but slightly hesitant, as though the person wasn't sure whether they should pick up. I took a shaky breath before speaking. "It's Maria," I said, my voice trembling. I need your help." There was a pause, and then the person responded, their tone changing immediately, filled with concern. "Maria, what's going on? Are you okay?" I swallowed hard. "No, I'm not okay, and I don't think I can do this anymore. I've tried. I've tried to hold everything together, but I'm falling apart and I don't know how to fix it." The person on the other end of the line was silent for a moment, and I could hear them shuffling in the background. Finally, they spoke again, their voice steady, as though they had dealt with this kind of thing before. "Maria, tell me what's going on." I closed my eyes, the weight of my emotions threatening to consume me. "My kids, they've abandoned me. They haven't called. They didn't even come to Jim's funeral. And I'm just so tired of pretending that everything is fine. They don't care. They don't even see me anymore." The words spilled out of me, raw and jagged, as though I had been holding them inside for too long. I didn't care anymore about trying to sound strong, about hiding my pain. This person knew me. They knew the truth of what had happened, and they weren't going to judge me for it. I could finally say the things I had been bottling up for weeks, for months, for years. "I don't know what to do," I continued, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can forgive them, but I need them to understand the pain they've caused. I need them to feel it. I need them to realize what they've lost, what they're throwing away." The person on the other end was quiet for a long time, and in that silence, I felt a strange sense of calm, as though they were weighing my words, understanding the depth of my anguish. When they finally spoke, their voice was gentle but firm. "You can't control them, Maria," they said softly. "You can't make them feel something they're not ready to feel, but what you can do is show them the consequences of their actions. You can't wait for them to change. You have to take control of this. You have to do what you need to do to heal." I didn't know what they meant at first. My mind was clouded by anger, by betrayal, by the overwhelming sense of loss. But then the clarity came, like a light cutting through the fog. Maybe they were right. Maybe waiting for Dylan and Emma to come around wasn't going to fix anything. Maybe, just maybe, I needed to make them understand in a way they couldn't ignore. "Are you saying I should do something?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm saying," they replied, "that you need to stop waiting. Take action. You've been the one carrying the weight of everything for so long. It's time to make them feel what they've done. But remember, this is for you, not for them. It's for your own peace of mind. You don't owe them any more of your heartache." I took a deep breath, the words sinking in. There was a sense of relief in the idea of finally letting go, of not waiting for a moment that might never come. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling the weight of the conversation settle into my bones. "I'm here, Maria," they said softly. "I'll help you however I can." After we hung up, I felt a strange calm wash over me, though the anxiety still lingered in the back of my mind. I knew what I had to do. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I knew that it might cause even more pain in the short term, but I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't let my children continue to hurt me, to make me feel small and unimportant. It was time to take back my life. The next day, I made the call. I dialed Dylan's number first. I was shaking as I held the phone to my ear, and I wondered if he would pick up. Part of me hoped he wouldn't. But then, after a few rings, his voice came through the speaker. "Mom, what's up?" I swallowed, gathering my thoughts. "Dylan," I began, my voice steady but firm, "we need to talk." "What's going on? You sound different." There was confusion in his voice, but I didn't have time to explain. "I've waited for you to come around, but I can't wait anymore," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of the words. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine when you've abandoned me. You didn't come to the funeral. You didn't call. And now, I'm done waiting for you to realize what you've done." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could feel Dylan's uncertainty. "Mom, I'm sorry. I really am. I've been struggling. I didn't know how to deal with everything." "No, Dylan," I said, my voice firm now, a mix of pain and anger. "You didn't know how to deal with it, but I did. I've been dealing with it alone, and you've left me to carry this weight all by myself. I can't forgive that right now." "Mom, please," he said, his voice desperate. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't know how to handle it." "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," I said, my voice softening a little. "But the truth is, you did hurt me, and I need you to understand that." There was a pause, and then Dylan finally spoke, his voice filled with regret. "I understand, Mom. I'll come home. I'll make it right." I didn't believe him, not yet, but that didn't matter. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken control. I had made my children feel the weight of their actions. Whether or not they changed was up to them. I had done all I could. And then I called Emma. I repeated the words, the same ones I had said to Dylan, but this time there was no hesitation. There was no begging. There was only the truth of what had happened, and the realization that I wasn't going to let their neglect destroy me. I didn't know if they would ever understand. But for the first time, I wasn't waiting for them to do what I thought was right. I was taking control, and I was doing it for me. And that was the hardest and most important thing I had ever done. I spent the next few days in a haze, a strange mix of relief and dread. It wasn't about the phone calls I'd made or the decisions I'd set into motion. It was about something deeper, something that gnawed at me from the inside. I had taken control, but at what cost? Was this the beginning of healing, or was I just setting myself up for more pain? The house felt too quiet again. Dylan had promised to come home, but the days passed with no word, no sign of him. Emma, too, had not called. I told myself it was just a matter of time, that they needed to process everything, that they would eventually realize how wrong they had been. But deep down, I feared I might have pushed them too far. What if they never came back? What if they never understood? I kept myself busy, filling my days with small, mundane tasks to keep the darkness at bay. I cleaned out Jim's closet, sorting through his shirts, his jackets, his shoes, his presence in every item both comforting and agonizing. Each piece I touched felt like I was slowly erasing him, and yet I knew that if I didn't do it, I would never be able to move forward. It was a paradox, one I couldn't escape. To hold on to the past, I had to let go. It was late in the afternoon when I heard the knock at the door. My heart skipped in my chest, the sudden surge of hope surprising me. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined it, but then there was another knock, more insistent this time. I opened the door, and there he was, Dylan. Standing there, looking every bit the young man he had become, yet in his eyes, I saw the uncertainty I had hoped would never be there. He was holding a suitcase in one hand, and the other was shoved awkwardly in his pocket. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt like a weight, and I realized I had no idea what to say. "Mom," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. I didn't know what I wanted to say either. I wanted to yell, to scream at him for all the hurt he had caused, but part of me knew that wouldn't help. Part of me just wanted to hold him, to feel him near, because even though he had betrayed me, he was still my son. The boy I had raised, the boy I had loved with every ounce of my being. I stepped aside, letting him in. He walked through the door without saying anything more, setting his suitcase down by the stairs. I watched him, unsure of what to do, unsure of what came next. He turned to face me then, his eyes filled with regret. I should have come home for Dad's funeral, he said, his voice quieter now. I don't even know why I didn't. I thought I could handle it by staying busy, but I was wrong. I was selfish, and I'm sorry. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of his apology hitting me harder than I expected. For a moment, I thought I would collapse from the weight of it all. His words weren't enough. Nothing could undo the hurt. Nothing could take away the feeling of betrayal, but they were a start. A small, fragile start. You hurt me, Dylan, I said, my voice shaking. You didn't just stay away from your dad's funeral, you stayed away from me, and I don't know how to make sense of that. I don't know if I can forgive you. He nodded, his face pale, like the weight of my words was sinking in. I know, I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't deserve it, but I want to make it right. I don't want to be the person who hurt you. Not anymore. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my heart torn between the desire to hold him and the need to protect myself from the hurt. The silence between us stretched out, thick with the things neither of us could say. Finally, I spoke, my voice softer. I don't know if I can trust you again, Dylan. I don't know if I can ever believe that you're really here for me. I get that, he said quickly, stepping forward, his hands outstretched as if to bridge the gap between us. But I'm here now, Mom. I know I've failed you and I don't know how to make it up to you. But I'll try. I will, I swear. His eyes were desperate, pleading for a chance, for something that could make up for the months of silence and the hurt he had caused. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he had changed, that he was ready to be the son I needed him to be. But my heart, broken as it was, wasn't so easily mended. I don't know if that's enough, I whispered. I don't know if it will ever be enough. He took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging, as though the weight of my words had finally hit him. I don't expect it to be. I just need you to know that I'm trying. I'm really trying, Mom. We stood there for a long time, neither of us knowing how to move forward. The truth was, I didn't know how to let go of the hurt, and I didn't know if I could. But for the first time in a long time, there was a small flicker of hope, a faint glimmer that maybe, just maybe, we could begin to heal. Where, Emma? I asked quietly after a moment, my voice barely above a whisper. Dylan's face fell at the mention of her name. He looked away, his hands clenching at his sides. She didn't come. She called me earlier. She said she was sorry, but I don't think she's ready to face you, or me. I nodded, the hurt in my chest swelling again. I had hoped Emma would come too. I had hoped that after everything, she would at least show up, if not for me, then for Jim. But it seemed that, like Dylan, she was avoiding the reality of what had happened. She was avoiding the consequences of her own actions. I'll talk to her, Dylan said, his voice quiet. I know she's hurting too, but I'll make sure she knows how much this hurts you. She needs to understand that this isn't just about Dad being gone, it's about family. It's about us, Mom. I hope you're right, I said, my voice cracking. But I can't keep waiting for her to come around. I can't keep waiting for you both to realize how much you've hurt me. I get it, Dylan said, his voice heavy with guilt. I really do, but I'm here now, and I'll keep showing up. I'll do whatever I can to make it right. I didn't know if I believed him. I didn't know if I could ever believe him fully again, but I had to let him try. I had to let him try to make amends, just as I had to try to find a way to forgive him. Thank you, I whispered, for coming home, for trying. Dylan nodded, his face softening. I love you, Mom. I nodded in return, the words I wanted to say stuck in my throat. I loved him too, but loving someone didn't always make things right. Loving someone didn't erase the hurt or the betrayal. It didn't make the emptiness go away. I'll make dinner, I said, trying to break the tension. We can talk more, just don't expect everything to be fixed in one night. Dylan smiled faintly. I know, but I'll take it, one step at a time. As he moved into the kitchen, I stood there for a moment, unsure of what would come next. The hurt hadn't gone away, and the walls I had built up around my heart weren't going to crumble overnight. But there was a chance, a small, fragile chance, that we could rebuild what had been broken. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen quickly, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Time is a strange thing. It drags and flies all at once, pulling you along, whether you're ready or not. For weeks, I had tried to keep myself busy, to ignore the gnawing ache in my heart. Dylan had returned, and though there was still a wide gulf between us, something in me had shifted. I had begun to believe, just a little, that there might still be hope. Maybe we could rebuild. Maybe we could move past the pain and betrayal. But even with Dylan's return, Emma remained distant. She called a few times, once to apologize for missing the funeral, once to say that she was dealing with stuff, and once more just to let me know she was thinking of me. But each time, I heard the walls she had built around herself. She didn't know how to face the reality of what had happened, didn't know how to face me. As the weeks passed, Dylan made an effort. He came home more often and we talked. Sometimes we would sit in silence together, both of us struggling to find the right words. Other times we would talk about Jim, about the memories that felt like they belonged to someone else. But I could see it in his eyes, the pain of knowing he had failed me, the guilt that weighed so heavily on his shoulders. He was trying, I could see that, but trying wasn't always enough. Then, one day, the phone rang. I knew the number immediately. It was Emma. Her name flashed on the screen, and for a brief moment I hesitated. I had been waiting for this call, this moment where she might finally open up and admit what she had done. But even though I was ready to answer, part of me was afraid. I didn't know what would happen when I picked up the phone. I didn't know if I would be able to handle what she would say. I took a deep breath before answering. Emma. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. Her voice was shaky, distant, and it hurt in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just that she hadn't come to the funeral. It was the absence in her voice, the way she was holding back, like she didn't know how to be the daughter I needed her to be. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm in the city," she replied. I'm sorry for everything. I know I should have come home, I should have been there, I didn't know what to do." I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. For weeks, I had waited for this, had hoped for this. But now that it was here, I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if I could go back to the way things were, to the daughter I had once raised, to the family that no longer felt like mine. "I needed you, Emma," I said, the words breaking my heart. "I needed you to be there with me for your dad. We needed to say goodbye together. I couldn't do it alone." "I know," she whispered, and there was a long pause. "I don't know why I stayed away. I think I was afraid of facing what had happened, afraid of facing you. But that was wrong. I should have been there for you." I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to tell her that I understood, that I could forgive her, that everything would be okay. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could. I didn't know if I could let go of the hurt, if I could ever stop feeling abandoned. "I don't know how to make this right, Mom," she said, her voice small now. "I don't know how to fix what I've done, but I want to be here for you now." "You can't fix everything, Emma," I said softly, the tears I had been holding back finally slipping down my cheeks. "I don't know if we'll ever go back to what we were. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but you're here now, and that's a start." "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered again, the sincerity in her voice unmistakable. "I'm really sorry, I love you." I sat in silence, letting her words hang in the air between us. I wanted to say it back. I wanted to tell her that I loved her, that it was all going to be okay. But in that moment, I couldn't. The pain was still too raw, too fresh. The wounds were still there, bleeding, even though I had tried to heal them. "I love you too, Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But we've got a long way to go. I need time. We all need time." "I know," she said softly. "I'll come home soon, I promise. I'll make things right." When we ended the call, I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, my heart a tangled mess of hope and fear. Emma had finally come to me, finally admitted what she had done. But could we ever truly heal from this? Could we ever be a family again? I wasn't sure, but what I did know was that there was no easy way to move forward. There was no magic fix. There was only time and effort on all our parts to rebuild what had been broken. A few days later, Emma came home. She stood at the door, a suitcase in hand, and for a moment we both just looked at each other. I wanted to run to her, to wrap my arms around her and tell her that everything was going to be okay. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until we had faced everything that had come between us. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, her eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness. "Hi," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Come in." She stepped inside, and we stood there, just the two of us, in the silence that hung between us like a thick fog. I didn't know how to begin. I didn't know how to fix everything that had gone wrong. "I've missed you, Mom," Emma said quietly, breaking the silence. "I've missed us. I don't want to lose you." "I don't want to lose you either," I said, my voice shaking. "But it's going to take time, Emma. It's going to take time for me to forgive you, and I need you to understand that." "I understand," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom, I really am, and I'm here now. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." I looked at her, my daughter, my little girl who had once sat on my lap, who had once held my hand when she was scared, and I felt a flood of emotions. It wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about rebuilding trust. It was about finding a way forward together, no matter how hard it might be. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could rebuild this broken family piece by piece. Maybe we could find a way to heal. But it would take time, and it would take effort. And I didn't know if we would ever truly be the same again. That night, we sat together at the kitchen table, the three of us, Dylan, Emma, and me. We didn't have all the answers. We didn't know where this would lead. But we were together for the first time in a long time, and that at least felt like a small victory. Jim was gone, and nothing would ever bring him back. But I realized something in that moment. I didn't need to carry this burden alone anymore. I had my children back, and together, we would face whatever came next. We would learn how to heal, how to forgive, and how to move forward. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. In the end, it wasn't the forgiveness that mattered most. It was the willingness to try. The willingness to face the pain, to face each other, and to take the first step toward healing. That was the final goodbye. Not the one at the grave, not the one at the funeral, but the one I had been waiting for all along, the goodbye to the past and the beginning of something new. Something uncertain, but something that might, in time, be beautiful again.